Taming the High Cost of College, Episode 47.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello, and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have a great interview with Karen Southall Watts. She's an author and educator, and she's going to talk to us today about the habits of A students, how to build study skills and time management and other great traits that help students be successful in college. So hopefully you'll learn a lot about coaching your student and helping them exceed both in high school and then in the high school to college transition. Before we jump into that, I want to remind you that our show notes are available at tamingthehighcostofcollege/47. So all the links and resources and information about her books will be available at that website if you want to look things up there. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into the great interview. All right, today I'm sitting down with Karen Southall Watts. She's an author as well as an adult education expert. Welcome, Karen.
Hi, good morning, Brad.
It's great talking to you. Before we jump into the material, let me ask you a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit of what you do and why you do it and how you came to do it.
Okay, well, I actually got into education as a career by accident. I went to college and studied humanities. I was a musician. I had children. And then I went back to school later on and picked up some business classes, and through a long, circuitous route, ended up as a business teacher, and then went back and got a graduate degree. And now I spend most of my days as a writing tutor in a community college. And this fall I'll be teaching humanities. So I'll be almost full circle back to where I started.
Wow, great. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been helping students with. I know you do a course on study skills and those kinds of things and helping high school students transition to become what we call an A student. Can you tell us a little bit about the course and what the types of things that people learn in that course?
Sure. What we did is a colleague and I, her name is Maren Gunning, and we both work in the tutoring department. We created a workshop called The Habits of A Students because we found that many students come to college without all the skills and strategies that they need to really succeed in adult education, and they don't always get those in every single course. So we developed a workshop that they could either come to the tutoring center and take, or by request, we go into classes and instructors have us come in and do a little guest session where we go over the strategies that can make you a more successful student in college.
Right. So I guess what we're talking about here, and I guess I've seen it and talked to a lot of parents about it, where a strong high school student isn't necessarily going to be a strong college student. Not to say that they are or they aren't, but it isn't always the case because of the transition. Can you explain a little bit about how things are different?
Well, it's like transitioning to a different country or a different universe sometimes. The adult education world is very different from the high school world. And so when students move from high school to college, they have to make that transition from basically being a student to being an adult learner. And an adult learner has to be much more accountable for their own education. And the college, although there are deadlines, there are assignments, there's structure there, there's not as much of a strong box as you get in high school. There's nobody that's going to call you if your homework is late. There are no parent meetings so that someone can come in and say, well, you've been late to class several times and what should we do about it? And if you're just skimming the first few words of every chapter and hoping that that's somehow going to work on the test, there's no adult person to step in and call you on that until the consequences of the failed test.
Okay. Is there any indicators for parents that their student might need to be learning this type of stuff?
You know, kids don't have these wonderful signs on their heads that say, I'm lacking organizational skills, or, gee, I'm not really good at time management. So as a parent, and I have 2 adult children myself, for us, the challenge is to have conversations about what's required in college. and about what that looks like and feels like. And for most parents, even if you haven't been to college, there's a lot of parallels in the workplace. So you start having conversations with your kids about what's your strategy for doing this? How do you plan to finish this project? What are you thinking about is going to happen after you do this section of your work? And listen to how they can either verbalize their strategy or their inability to verbalize their strategy. If they're saying, well, I just haven't really thought about that. I just figured it would all kind of come together at the last minute. That can indicate to you as a parent, okay, here's a spot where maybe we need to do some work. One of the other areas that really plays into success in college that many students are unaware of are what we call interpersonal skills. And among those are things like being polite and being on time and being able to engage in a conversation with someone, especially if your points of view disagree, in a very cordial manner. And parents typically know their children very well. And you can see at the dinner table and on Saturday afternoons while everybody's playing video games together, or however you're socializing where your kids are around, you can tell if they need some work in those areas. And before they get to college is the time to have those conversations about, okay, let's talk about, say you wanted to disagree with my political views on something. How would we do that with no shouting and no cursing and nobody stomping out of the room? You can start laying that groundwork.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So I guess a couple things. So if I have high school kids and we know we're on our way to college in the next few years, are there things that we could be doing like junior and senior year in high school to help with the transition and the study skills and that kind of stuff?
I think there's a lot of things you can do. The first one, I think, is to work on the interpersonal side of it. Because one of the qualities that we declared in our workshop for A students is that A students are adaptable and collaborative. So if you start off with a high school student who just is resistant to even having these conversations, starting with study skills is a hard way to do that. Saying you need to change the way you study, or you need to study harder, or you need to be more accountable for your grades, that's a rough way to start if your student doesn't feel like having those conversations and doesn't feel like they are able to change and willing to change, and that you're going to be there and support them during the change process. So I recommend starting with the accountability and interpersonal skills part. Have dinner conversations that are about current events. Interact around school topics, but elevate that conversation a little bit. Ask for opinions from your student. Well, how do you think you would have taught this lesson if you had been the instructor? Or do you think there's something else they could be adding to this? Once you've got that dynamic there where the student sees that there's a lot to learn, there's a lot of places to go and expand and change in my role as a student, then you can start adding things like, well, do you think that's the best way to spend your 4 hours? If you've only got 4 hours and you have a term paper due tomorrow, maybe we should cut these hours up in a different way. I think you get more buy-in if you start with the relationship part first and then go to the strategy part.
Okay, great. And then another thing you mentioned was being cordial or being polite. And I guess the first thing that popped into my brain is the technology in the classroom, the cell phones and the laptops, and what is generally acceptable in a college classroom. I mean, in the high schools, they've said thou shalt not have any device, and at a lot of schools. But what is the typical college policy on that? And then how do you do it well if you're going to do it?
Well, colleges have real difficulty laying down the law around technology the way that high schools do, because we are dealing with adults. We're dealing with young adults who are fresh out of high school who may be super excited to bring their devices to class. And then we're dealing with non-traditional students as well who may have been in the workforce for 10 years and are not used to having somebody tell them they can't do something. Having said that, individual instructors often place rules in their classrooms. No cell phones in my classroom, no open computers in my classroom unless we're doing an activity together, that kind of thing. It can be very individualized with the instructors. This sort of inconsistency between different instructors and between different schools is one of the reasons that we created the workshop and offer the training to raise the awareness of the students about what that means when you're accessing technology during class. The classroom is the place where we practice our skills for the workplace. We don't magically become great employees the day that we graduate if we haven't practiced all of those years before graduation. And so we talk to students about the fact that if I'm giving a talk in a math class and you're playing with your phone, that indicates to me that you're not only not paying attention, but you don't really respect me as an instructor. That's a really bad dynamic to have with an instructor. That's an even worse dynamic to have with your future boss. And so we just try to raise that awareness with students as to what it means when you select technology over the person who's speaking to you in your face. And how would they feel if those roles were reversed and that kind of thing. It's a learning curve. And for our younger students, sometimes the joy of being able to bring their technology to class, it takes a while for the new to wear off of that. But eventually they do seem to get the hang of it, and they learn that there are some socially acceptable rules about when we do and do not take phone calls, and when we do and do not sit around and decide to play the latest level of Candy Crush or surf the internet.
Right. And I guess what I'm thinking is, too, that I think some instructors will be very upfront and blunt about it, like, put that away, please.
Right.
And other instructors will just take a mental note of, oh, that's that guy over there.
Mm-hmm.
He annoys me. And when
Yes.
it comes, but he's not really going to say anything.
That's the awareness that we want our students to have, because that little subtle, okay, that guy annoys me thing, it can be bad in college. It may or may not affect your grade, depending on what kind of course you're in and how participation is graded. But we're looking down the road towards the workplace. That's not the way you want your coworkers and your supervisor to think about you. So the time to practice these skills and make these mistakes is during the college years, so that when you go into the workplace, you can really give people your total undivided attention, and that's going to make you stand out compared to lots and lots of other employees, and that's going to put you on the road to more success in the job place.
Absolutely. And as an employer myself, I actually just hired a couple interns in my office, and there is definitely a generational, I guess they make me feel really old and out of touch, but that I guess is, that's why I'm hiring them though, because I need them for the technology side of things. I need them helping me with Facebook and other technology. But anyway, in the transition from high school to college, I know for me it was kind of a shock, as well as nobody kind of watching over me and making sure I did my homework. And it was very easy, especially my freshman year, to say, well, the first 4 weeks, there's nothing due, so I'm not going to do anything. And
Yeah.
I immediately was behind, or not immediately, 4 weeks into it, I was cramming for tests and not keeping up with material. And I just fell behind from the get-go because I guess I didn't know any better, or at least I don't think I did it consciously, but it was a stupid thing to do.
And luckily for most of us, college is the place where we can make those kind of mistakes and recover from them, because there's always another semester, there's always another course. But that is one of the ways that parents can begin prepping their students to go to college, is to provide them with a few opportunities to do things without giving them the structure. So instead of saying, I need you to do these tasks and they all have to be finished by 3, and here's the way to do them, and here's the order to do them in, and here's exactly the way to handle it, you just give them a more open-ended task. All of this needs to be finished by the end of Saturday. Now, how are you going to tackle that and take it apart and make sure you get it all done, and that you're not up in the middle of the night doing it? And provide those sort of low stress kind of opportunities for your teen to practice that skill of time management and task management and self-direction. And then when they get to college, it's less of a shock.
Right. So now let's fast forward a little bit. Let's say we have that college freshman and we get that phone call. And obviously maybe the student's 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away, and they're calling up and saying, I just blew it on my first round of tests. I'm really struggling. I'm not in a good place right now, Mom or Dad.
That's the phone call none of us wants to get, I must say. Even as a parent, that's the phone call I did not want to get. I think the first thing that we should do, and I say this with my educator hat on, not my parent hat on, is resist the urge to be a helicopter parent and go in and try to fix it all. College administrators and instructors find that very, very unpleasant. And students don't actually learn anything from that process. However, you can certainly provide the support for the student to start fixing it for themselves. And I think that's the most important thing. I would say if I got that phone call of I'm in over my head, I'm drowning, the first thing I would tell my student to do is go back and review the support services that are available to them on campus. Almost all colleges have a whole menu of support services available to students. Everything from counseling for stress and relationship problems to tutoring, like the department that I work in. Most schools should have an office of what we call accessibility, so that students with learning disabilities or physical disabilities or any other barrier to learning can get the proper accommodation so that they can access material and be more successful. And then many schools have coaching programs or some type of peer mentoring program. So there's typically a whole list of things that are available to students that most of our students don't look for until they've got a problem.
Right. So yeah, there's all kinds of services. And let me back up. You mentioned helicopter parent, almost to the point of being rude, perhaps, but I just want to define that. What do you mean by not be a helicopter parent? What would a helicopter parent do?
A helicopter parent, and I didn't invent this term.
Well, yes, no, I mean, we've all heard it.
I have no idea who did, but helicopter parents are typically parents that hover over their children long into adulthood, and every time they have a problem, they come in to solve the problem for the child.
Right. So a helicopter parent would be calling the instructors and saying,
exactly,
little Johnny didn't do well. What can we do to
exactly
get extra credit? Or calling
right.
the schools or calling.
Right. And when Johnny is 6 years old, that's perfectly appropriate. When Johnny is 20, then what you ought to be saying to him is, okay, find out your instructor's office hours, find out your instructor's policy for extra credit or makeup work or late work, and you go to your instructor, explain your situation, and you work out a solution with your instructor. That's going to serve that student much better in the long run. Even if they don't end up with a fabulous grade in that one course, they have now learned how to solve their own problems. They've now learned how to appropriately communicate with their instructors, and they've learned what strategies did and did not work in that course. So the chances of you getting more phone calls in the future from your student saying, oh my gosh, I'm in completely over my head, those chances go down over time. The more that you redirect them sort of gently but firmly to go and solve their own problems by utilizing the resources that are there for them.
Right. And again, this is also stuff that you can start working on, I believe, in the high school. Certainly
yes.
Junior and senior,
yes.
They can go and work with their high school instructors doing things similarly.
Yes. And I think that modeling that early and often, even when they're still younger and you're still helping more in the problem-solving process, but having that student engaged in the process and having them walk through the steps of what it's like to solve a problem calmly and without a lot of overly emotional outbursts really serves them well as they get older and as they get into the adult education system. And that is a huge favor to them versus coming in and trying to solve all their problems for them. And trust me, I'm a parent. It's not like I never, ever did that myself, because it is so tempting to go in and try to make it all better. So I say this from a position of love and having been there.
Yes.
Uh,
Okay. Another situation that I see a lot. I mean, I see it with my son right now. He's able to get a kind of A-, B+ without bringing a book home. And he's only in 6th grade right now, so it's not that difficult. But I also see him building very bad habits. Things like, well, I've got to study hall just before math class. That's when I do the homework for, that's due. So I do
Right.
2:00. I'm doing homework that's due at 2:30, and I'm getting a lot of stupid mistakes on it because I'm rushing. And how is the transition for that type of student? And what can we do about that? Where maybe they're a strong student without a lot of effort in high school, and that may not continue into college.
Yeah, that is the double-edged sword of having a brilliant child. You look down and you think, oh, this child is so wonderful. They're so smart, but they're doing their homework right before class. So it can be really, really challenging. I think one of the things parents can do is explore what else is available within the junior high or the high school. Are there some advanced courses that might be more challenging? Are there some other things that the student could be doing in addition to regular classes, clubs, and activities that might stretch their abilities a little bit more? And then if you have a really good relationship with your son or daughter, you can sit them down and say, here's what my experience was in college, that story that you told before about what it was like to go to school and not do all that studying at the beginning because it seemed so easy. I know that with my own children, being very honest with them about the mistakes that I made in education was helpful for them to look at it and go, oh, well, if that's the way it worked, and people do make mistakes and they recover and they go on, they incorporate all that into their psyche about what's going to happen when I get older. They identify with their parents in some way. The other thing you can do is take kids as early as possible into environments where they can see what's coming for college. If they're too young to go to official college weekend kind of things, lots of colleges do special presentations of, say, engineering projects or music concerts, things that showcase the work of students, and get them out there seeing what's going to happen at the higher levels, and the fact that that stuff is probably going to be a little bit more challenging than third period math, and plant that seed in their head early on that, there might be something up ahead that's going to require a little bit more effort.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about grades too. Do we focus too much on grades? I guess one of the things that, as an employer, I don't really care what your grades were once you've had a little bit of job experience. If you're straight out of college, grades I think probably matter. But 5 years into it, it almost doesn't matter what your degree was in, let alone what your grades were. It's what have you learned and what can you do for me now?
Exactly. And even some people, when they're straight out of college, they've done so much other stuff while they were in college, maybe internships or volunteer work or special projects, that their grades don't matter that much either. What I tell my students and my private clients is that employers hire people. They do not hire transcripts. And so while you want to do the best that you can in courses and you want to demonstrate your mastery and earn good grades, it's not worth it to make yourself sick over your grades. And I do see this in some students, that they are so worried about getting a perfect grade point average that they literally make themselves ill. And most business people that I work with say the very same thing that you do. I don't look at people's grades when I hire them. I'm looking for their ability. So I try to get people, once they've got these good study habits down and once they've incorporated these behaviors and characteristics that will lead to success, then I try to get them to start thinking about, okay, let's develop you as a whole person. And a whole person is more than the grades on the transcript. And that's who the employer wants to hire. They want somebody who has those communication skills. They want somebody who can collaborate and work with others. They want somebody who's adaptable and trainable. None of that can be adequately conveyed by a letter grade.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's wrap things up. Do you have any quick tips that we can end with?
I think one of the most fun, easy things that people could do to plan for going to college is, as a family, read parts or all of The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. It's got lots of those, here's how you solve a problem, concrete examples, and families could work through stuff together. I think having a written plan for what you want to do education-wise is really, really great. It gives the student a chance to visualize where they want to go and what they want to be, and the parent a chance to step in and apply a little bit of reality. And then, like everything else, put in some time for evaluation. So plan as a family after that first semester to sit down and talk about how did things go and where do we want to go next. Always be reevaluating and learning and growing and changing.
Okay, well, great. I appreciate all the great information. I know you have a book that was recently released, so tell us a little bit about what you have out there that might be helpful and anything else that where people can get a hold of you and find your book and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, I do have a book out. It's called Messenger, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Communication, and it's a basic communication skills book designed for small business owners or any other business professionals. The easiest way to find me is at Ask Karen on Twitter. It's much easier to spell than my regular name. And if you look for me online and search my name, Karen Southall Watts, and adult education, you can find lots and lots of free articles I've done. And I've got several video resources for students on how to prepare for the college process, how to do college writing, and some other sort of getting started kinds of resources, and they're all free.
Great. Well, we will put some links to that material in the show notes as well, so people can go to our website, and there'll be links to your book, to the articles you've mentioned. So I'd like to thank you for the great information, and we'll wrap things up here, but I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Karen. I know I learned a lot about study habits, and I'm going to start applying that to my 6th grader and 5th grader. As always, we have show notes available at tamingthehighcostofcollege/47 for the 47th episode. And if you enjoy the show and you want to subscribe, you can go to iTunes or Stitcher, or you can use your latest podcast app on your phone or iPad and subscribe to Taming the High Cost of College and get this podcast every week as it comes out directly to your device. That's all we have for today. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns 2 companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.